Looks like we're going to be about 2 minutes late today, folks. Hold tight. Is this microphone? Oh, that's horrible. Sorry about that. Sorry about that. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right. We're going to rock and roll as soon as I can press a couple of buttons here. Hold tight, YouTube. Fuck me, man.
And here we go. It's the Benjamin Dixon Show. Your mission, should you choose to accept it, is
not merely peace in our time, but peace in all time.
I have no fear whatsoever of anybody or anything.
Did you think no one was watching?
Injustice anywhere.
Looks like we're going to be about 2 minutes late.
Your mission.
To boldly go where no man has gone before.
To reclaim the American dream.
To be given the right of human beings to be afforded equal rights and equal opportunities. By any means.
It's the Benjamin Dixon Show. If you're hearing his voice, you're hearing the voice of reason.
You've certainly come to the right place.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Benjamin Dixon Show. I am your host, Benjamin Dixon. You guys are going to have to bear with me 1 second while I fix this short in this cable. That means I need to get a new cable first thing in the morning. It is November 9th, 2015, Monday night. Thank you so much for joining us wherever you are joining us from. I want to go over a couple of things. That I will be discussing in today's show. Give me 2 seconds, folks. I'm just a tad bit discombobulated here. So a lot of interesting news coming out of Missouri, juxtaposed to what's happening at Yale University. Then we have the TPP deal that was publicly released. So there's a lot happening in the news. And then I'm going to discuss those three things in depth. And then at the end of the broadcast, I want to discuss this news anchor. And unfortunately, I don't have his name handy. I'll find it on Twitter. But it's a black news anchor out of Houston who went on a quote unquote rant over the Tyshawn Lee issue. Assassination, essentially is what it was. And I want to juxtapose his rant with what I discussed last Thursday. Because what can I say? Dude pissed me the hell off. That's about all. That's all I could say. And this is weird. Why is my YouTube? This is odd. My YouTube channel is broadcasting in Spanish for whatever reason. YouTube, get it together. But okay, so let's backtrack before I get to that, and I'll find his name. I want to talk about what's happening in Missouri, what's happening at Yale University, and then we'll discuss the TPP. You could join the conversation, 857-600-0518. You can join our chat room live at youtube.com. Just look for the live stream, and we have a live chat going on over there. I see a couple of people are already in the room chatting, and you can tweet me your questions at the BPD show. First up, Missouri. If you have not been under a rock, you already know what's happening there. Interesting development in the sense that the speed with which the demands of the football players and the students, one of the demands. There's a list of demands, and I don't want to miss all of their different demands. But one of the demands from the University of Missouri football team was for the president to resign. President Wolf, I believe is his name. Yeah, his name is Timothy M. Wolf. He resigned after protests from the students. Now, it's important that you get the order of what happened, because we don't want to erase the actions that took place by all of the students prior to the football team getting involved. But then you also need to understand the context of why the students were protesting in the first place. to give you a snapshot of why they were protesting in the first place, let's start with the most recent event. The most recent event was the destruction of one of the particular campuses by allegedly by a white student who drew a swastika in human feces. In other words, he took shit and drew a Nazi symbol. Now, this was the culmination. This was the not even the straw. This was the bat that broke the camel's back. But students have been complaining about racial tensions, about racist terms, about being called the N-word, about not feeling welcomed, about just consistent treatment throughout the years by students, other students at the university. Now, what set it off even further was the fact that the university president was rather, as one article used the word, blasé about the issue. He didn't really believe the issue was taking place, that it was happening. He didn't really believe that it was a problem, but it was a problem big enough for one student, Jonathan Butler, to jump out and begin protesting with the hunger strike. This was on November 2nd. So last Monday he started a hunger strike. The hunger strike was supported by other students underneath the hashtag Concerned Student 1950. A lot of backstory that I have to give you, because this story kind of, you know, for those of us across the country who were not there in Missouri, this story kind of hit with a very rapid pace. It developed very quickly. So before most of us even knew what was happening at the University of Missouri, it had already escalated to the point where on Saturday, the football team got involved. On Sunday, the coach of the football team had gotten involved. By Monday, the teachers had decided to join in with the students protesting. And by Monday night, by Monday afternoon, the president and the chancellor both resigned, which was one of the requests made by the students. Okay, so that's the speed with which it escalated. So you had Jonathan Butler, who decided to start a hunger strike because of the treatment that they were getting, and more importantly, the lack of attention that the president was giving their issues. And I think that would be the straw that broke the camel's back, was that despite all of the complaints, despite all of the concerns, the president dismissed it as, you're seeing things, or you're hearing things, or it's not really as bad as you think, or you're making it up. This was the feeling, the sentiment. There's a video out there of him, of the president interacting with some of the students, and he described systematic oppression as the student not feeling as though they had the opportunity to get a fair shake. I'm paraphrasing, a poor paraphrasing, but that's the spirit of what he said. The problem with that is that that is not what systemic oppression is and systemic racism. Now, whether or not, you know, we can have some different debates, but that's clearly not the definition. And that is the worst definition that you could give people who feel as though they have been oppressed or that they have been discriminated against in an environment where people coming from, let's say, the South Side of Chicago have never been referred to as the N-word, except for out of the colloquial version of the N-word that Black people may choose to or not choose to greet each other with, right? But they come to the University of Missouri and they are called the N-word by white students, which clearly has a different context. If I have to discuss that, actually, I won't discuss that. Go and check my video backlog, my podcast backlog on the difference between Black people referring to each other colloquially as nigga versus a white person calling you nigger. If you can't understand the difference, then I don't know what to tell you. Now, that being said, that's the backdrop. Jonathan Butler decided to start a hunger strike until the president resigned. There was very little national coverage of this up until the football team decided to get involved, and not the entire football team. The minority players of the football team decided to get involved. This was on Saturday night. The football players decided to get involved. By Sunday, Now, hang on. Let me, I have to put this in the timeline. So the football players get involved. All of a sudden, you have this huge backlash from different alumni, from different graduate students, from people who were stakeholders. You had this big backlash of just general observers, your normal trolls, this huge backlash over these football players deciding to protest against what they felt was racism that was being ignored at the University of Missouri. So now you have all these counter voices who are saying you guys are ungrateful, you guys need to be replaced, you guys need to be set down, you need to lose your scholarship, the usual, right? Everything that you would expect. By Saturday, no, strike that. By Sunday, the coach tweeted out a picture of the entire team, majority of the entire team, standing in solidarity. And I want to show you that particular picture, those of you who are watching live on YouTube, because it's something to see. Once I saw this picture, and this is by Coach Gary Pinkel, once I saw this picture, that's when I knew that that the president was going to resign very quickly, very soon. Let me zoom in a little. And so there you have the Mizzou family stands as one. We are united. We are behind our players. Concerned Student 1950. And he initiated Gary Pinkel, GP. Here's the problem for the president and the reason he had no choice but to resign. If the coach had said, well, I'm not playing those players, we'll put in whatever, we'll put in other players, we'll put in the second, third string, whatever. If the coach had done that, that probably would have weakened, not probably, that significantly would have weakened the positioning, the bargaining positioning of the players. But because the coach backed it, that meant that there would be no Missouri football on this upcoming weekend. That meant that they were going to lose $1 million a game. Now, one article I read, I believe it was The Nation. The Nation outlined gave the salary of the president, Tim Wolf, at I believe it was $459,000 a year. Great salary, right? You know, maybe I'm definitely in the wrong profession. $459,000 a year, but compared to the $1 million a year that they would have lost, $1 million a game that they would have lost, the president did not stand a chance. Now, this speaks volumes to the importance of football at a university. This speaks volumes to the power of a coach over the president at almost every major university where football is the lifeblood of that university, SEC in particular. Most of us knew the power of a coach versus the power of a president, but we saw it on full display, and the coach got behind the players. Now, it didn't stop there. On this morning, the teachers decided that they would walk out. The teachers were not going to teach. Everyone in that campus stood against that president, and the president resigned. Now, here's the question. Well, maybe I don't even want to ask this question yet, but it has to be asked. What good is the president resigning going to do in terms of the actual goals of the university? Well, one, it sends a huge message. I'm getting ready to answer my own question, by the way, in case you didn't know. It sends a huge message to the next president and to the body in general that not just that racism won't be tolerated, because that's a cliche statement, but it speaks to the power of solidarity when opposing racism. And I'm just talking to you with this picture on the screen still. So let me get my picture back up here. It speaks to the power of solidarity against racism. The fact that on Sunday, the president put out a statement essentially saying he's not going anywhere. And then on Monday, he changes his entire tune and says, not only am I going in somewhere, but I apologize. I apologize for what happened at the homecoming. I apologize for being blasé about the racism that has been complained. And then he even conceded. He said that there is racism at the University of Missouri, and that's not acceptable. I don't really have, I'm going to be honest with you. I have some counter commentary to give in 1 second about the movement. But I don't know if I have much more to say about this other than kudos to Jonathan Butler, kudos to the football team, kudos to the students, to the teachers, and to the coach standing by them. Because here's the thing. Those of us who are not there, we don't know the nature of that relationship, of that environment, of that climate. But I think it's safe to say that the head coach, Gary Pinkel, was not going to put himself on the line without, one, either witnessing the racism himself, two, trusting the word of his students, of his players, and taking their word for it and saying, even though I have not seen it, I see what these players are telling me. And because of my relationship with these players, if they're telling me this, then this is something that I believe, and I'm going to stand with them. We're not there, but what am I trying to say? I'm trying to say that just because we don't experience the racism firsthand doesn't mean that it does not exist. It doesn't mean that it always does exist, but it does not mean that it does not exist. Double, triple negatives. I got lost in that one, but you understand what I'm saying. We didn't see it. We weren't there. I can't tell you all the different examples of racism that happened there because I don't know. What I can tell you is that this student was so passionate about it. This student's experiences were so dramatic rather, that he decided to go on a hunger strike and risk his health and risk his life to speak out about the fact, not only about the racism, but that the person in charge of the university system there just was indifferent to that racism. Now, I want to juxtapose that with what's going on at Yale University, and I have a whole section on the TPP. We'll talk about the TPP because I think that's very, very important for in the long run. But compared to what's going on at Yale University, I start hearing bits and pieces about the protests from last week. What's going on there is very similar. And actually, this one I can dig my teeth into a little bit more because this one I have personal experience with because of the complaint that they made. October 31st, Yale University, there was a party, the fraternity party, where one of the students alleged that they were turned away because they were Black. She made a post about it. And actually, I have the post here, and I'll pull up that post for you guys. Let me get that post here. She made a post about it, and that post subsequently went viral. And, you know, that's just the way of the world. Something goes viral. And funny, it's the same SAE. What's up with SAE around the nation? SAE, you guys remember the Oklahoma chapter SAE that was singing the song on the bus, you can hang them from a tree, but they'll never pledge with me. There'll never be a nigger in SAE, right? So Nima Gither said that she wanted to take a moment to give a shout out to the members of Yale's SAE chapter who turned away a group of girls from their party last night, explaining that admittance was on a white girls only basis. And a belated shout out to the SAE member who turned me and my friends away for the same reason last year. God bless the USA. All right. So that was her tweet. Tweet went viral. And this was almost the culmination of tensions that had been building on Yale University campus. Prior to that, I believe one of the deans sent an email out, and I'll have to get the name of the particular dean. I have it here somewhere. I guess if I just go to my notes, I have it here. But one of the deans sent an email out asking professors to suggest or advise their students not to wear something offensive for Halloween. One of the professors, Erica Christakis, a lecturer, she responded with an email that apparently went public, basically saying that is there no room. Well, first of all, hang on, let me give it the proper context because this is pretty important here. So she wrote a response questioning the need to exercise implied control over students' choice of garb. Is there no room anymore for a child to be a little obnoxious and a little bit inappropriate or provocative or, yes, offensive? This This was greeted by another response and, an article being published. And then it was greeted by just different tensions going on at Yale University, followed up by a video that went viral. Here's the thing. Everything goes viral, right? There's a great piece by Daniel. I got to get his last name and I'll tell you, but from the Washington Post that discusses the role of viral social media as it plays in this. But here, so the video that went viral that created a very strong counter narrative in this story was a student confronting what they call the master of the campus, which is, news for me. I don't, all right, fine. You call, basically, it sounds like he was he's the person responsible for making sure the people that are there are comfortable and safe. Not a dean, not an academic dean, but basically like a dorm master is what they call them. The video of the confrontation between the girl from a student and the dean master, the dorm master, or whatever it is that they call it. And the girl essentially losing her cool, starting to cuss out the dorm master because the dorm master said that was not his job. And she essentially said, well, what the F are you here for? What the F are you here for? If it's not this, what are you here for? That video went viral and created an entire counter narrative to the actual complaint of the students. The complaint of the students was that we're constantly being bombarded by all of these images that are offensive and creating not only that, but now we're being turned away because we're Black. On top of that, with people, just feeling as though they're not welcomed at Yale University. So all of this is creating a climate where we don't feel welcome. And your job, dorm master, is to make sure that we all have this safe environment, blah, 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 blah. The only thing that I really want to take out of that, besides this great piece in the Washington Post by his name is Daniel Dresner, and I'll have the link, and actually I'll drop the link in the chat room. Daniel Dresner, he discusses the clash between the administrators and the students that went viral and why it was problematic for everybody. It was because it showed nothing but a confrontation. This one I have to unpack a little bit more because I think it's much more relevant to our conversations that we have on a regular basis here. The video went viral, creating this counter narrative because of the student lashing out at an administrator so emotionally with such vulgar language. And everyone was like, what's wrong with this girl? What's wrong with this student? Basically saying that if they got their way, that this ruins college, this ruins university, that people should be able to offend. College is all about being able to say stupid ideas and offend people and all these types of things. And so now everyone has taken attention off of the fact that what was the impetus behind their complaint in the first place was the fact that they have to every year about this time be exposed to people who want to intentionally offend you because they think it's funny to dress up in blackface or to dress up like Trayvon Martin with a bullet hole and with Skittles and tea, or to dress up as whatever, just for the sake of being offensive. This goes back to the conversation of the right of people to offend and how that comes in conflict and the tension of our freedom of speech, as well as the right for people to live and exist in a space where they don't have to constantly be subjected. That's the word, subjected to this type of offense. Because if I have to be in an environment on an everyday basis where I am constantly being bombarded with people who want to intentionally offend me, ask yourself what can actually be accomplished. You couldn't live. These are the students' homes, right? You live on campus. Can you live? Consider your home right now. Could you live in a place where you are constantly being targeted to be offended, simply for the sake of being offended, right? Because I have the constitutional right to offend you, so I'm going to offend you every opportunity I get. There's an interesting tension that exists there. It's not so cut and dry. We can't just dismiss their freedom and their autonomy to wear and dress and carry themselves however they want to carry themselves. But then that comes into direct conflict with other students' ability to exist in an environment that does not include being offended on a regular basis. So this is the tension that's going on at Yale University, and I highlight it because it really is a question that is unanswered in America in general, across the world, but particularly in America. How far does your right go to be free go once what you want to be free with is to be offensive and to bring emotional harm to someone else? It's like it's the simple trolling situation, like of social media, right? You know, we want these platforms to be as free as possible, but if your platform creates an environment that is not palatable to the average person, then you're doing yourself a disservice. But the problem is, this is not social media. They can't just cut off Twitter. They can't just block you when they have to go to class with you. They can't just block you when they have to walk across campus and see you there dressed and see you there calling them the N-word and see you there. You know, it creates all of these not unique, but these interesting conflicts and these interesting tensions that we have yet to answer. But here's the last thing I'll say about both of those stories. And then we're going to go to a break, and then I'm gonna come back and talk about the TPP and one other thing. The most interesting thing about both of those stories that I think is very, very important for us to consider is the fact that when you have these tensions, it generally means that there is one group who, for the most part, is guilty of doing the offense at the expense of everyone else. And it also means that we are requiring people to bow down to the freedom of someone else to offend us. And this is a question that we have yet to answer. And people wonder why the girl got so upset and lashed out and started cursing and all these things that were now, you know, everyone is focusing on the fact that she's so angry, and everyone's focusing on the fact that she's so indignant. And I could play the video, but it really is a lot of cursing. And I have the link that I'll share with you. And actually, you know what, better than that, let me play the video so that you can see, so that you can see for yourself exactly what it was. And I wonder if
the exception is because other
okay, I'm actually just going to play the audio. Here we go.
people have rights too, not just
Walk away. Walk away. He doesn't deserve to be listened to. He doesn't deserve to be listened to.
Unsafe space here for all. Stay quiet. For all students. You understand that? As your position as master, it is your job to create a place of comfort and home for the students that live in Silliman. You have not done that. By sending out that email, that goes against your position as master. Do you understand that? Then
no, I don't agree with that.
Then why the fuck did you accept the position?
Because
Who the fuck hired you?
I have a different
You
vision
should
than you.
step down. If that is what you think about being a master, you should step down. It is not about creating an intellectual space. It is not. Do you understand that? It's about creating a home here. You are not doing that.
You're supposed to be our advocate.
All right, that's enough of that. All right. So, as you can tell from that 10-second segment, the student lashed out with an explosion of anger because of her expectation of the role of the master was that they create this safe space. This is being violated by, or not violated, but the tension. It comes into tension with other students' freedom to dress up in blackface. And what's interesting about it the most is this is what I want to say, and we're going to go to break. Think about it this way. In your professional life, where you work, would your company allow an environment where people can come in and be offensive to you and they're your colleague, right? Or even if you're not your colleague, you could be your subordinate or your boss, whatever. In your professional life, would any of your jobs allow someone to come to work dressed up as a Nazi or dressed up in blackface or dressed up in something that is clearly offensive? And so what's amazing to me is that really, in a strange way, capitalism has an answer to this because but on a student campus, they're all forced to live in this space together. And so that same freedom and the expectation, rather not freedom, but the expectation of mutual respect that you would get on your job, that there are actually protections for and against, it does not necessarily exist in these university spaces. Not out of force of law, mind you. This is the important thing. Not out of the force of law, but out of the force of a culture and a climate and basic expectations of decency and humanity. You will not come to the job that I work at dressed a certain way when that way that you're dressing is offensive to someone else. It just goes against all of it. Just breaks a moral code and a moral agreement that we have with each other. But that expectation seems to not trickle down to the university level. Maybe your job, I don't know, maybe your job allows that. But I'm just, that's the dynamic around it. So there are a lot of complicated forces that I really, not forces, but complicated nuances in this particular story that really deserve some time to talk about, but I'm kind of tired of talking about it. So we'll talk about something else after I come back from break. But I do want to lift up that one simple tension that is unresolved. What do we do about someone's freedom to be offensive when that offense is perpetually harming and intruding on the rights of other people to have a space where they're not constantly bombarded with offensive imagery? That's one of those things I don't have an answer to. Actually, I do, but I'd rather us think about it together. All right. We're going to take a quick break. You can join the conversation, 857-600-0518. When I come back, we're going to break apart the TPP. This is the Benjamin Dixon Show. We'll be back after this. What's going on, everyone? This is Benjamin Dixon, and I wanted to take a minute to tell you how you can support the Benjamin Dixon Show. One thing I've learned over the last few months is that it is impossible for us to do this without you. Every time you click on a link, every time you read an article, every time you share a podcast or share a YouTube video, you are absolutely supporting our show. And without you, it's simply impossible. But there's another way you can support us. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com and register for our blog. You will be directly contributing to the success of the Benjamin Dixon Show by registering for our blog. You will help us increase our audience and increase our reach. Remember, every click counts, every subscribe counts, and every share counts. So go over to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com, click on the Contact Us tab, and register for our blog today. There is a radical, violent revolution taking place in America right now. Figuratively speaking, where we are ripping from the status quo the very notion that they have the right to define the status quo. We are ripping it from them. We are telling them that they no longer get to decide what America is going to look like. And that is terrifying for a lot of people. That is downright terrifying when someone comes into your home only to help you to understand that your home is not yours in isolation, that we share this home equally, and that we have the right to be comfortable in this home just as much right as you have to be comfortable, so that a white Christian straight man, the comfort that he feels in America will be experienced by the gay Black woman and every other intersection that has been erased. That, my friends, that is a revolution if I have ever seen one. That is something, that is the next stage of evolution in America.
Show.
Ben Dixon. He's obviously he's a radio show host or something like that.
You're damn right I am.
Hey.
All right. Okay, I have no idea what that is. Hold tight, folks. There we go. Okay, welcome back. I've got a short in the cable that didn't reveal itself until just as I started the show. So it is what it is. Okay, let me read some comments. And this is why, this is why I'm glad I have this chat section. So Billy, yes, Billy, I'm reading your comments here, Billy. Billy said in the chat room, incident reports. Yeah, there was a little bit more in the video, Billy, but the part that I want to bring out is she lashed out and started cursing because she had no self-control. That is the thing that people are writing, and people did a lot of thought pieces about it, and what's wrong with millennials today in college, and the fact that they're being coddled, and all these different types of things. Here's the reality of it is, the master, his name, whatever his name was, I got his name somewhere, but most of us watching that video had no idea who he was and his real job duty. As the article by Daniel Dresner outlined, his real job responsibility is to create a safe environment where students feel comfortable to learn. And so when he said, I don't agree with my job, I don't agree with what you're saying is my job description. Well, that's basically like somebody I hired telling me that I don't agree with what you're telling me my job is. I think most reasonable people at that point, if they have been frustrated, they haven't been heard, or they feel like they haven't been heard, and they felt like they've been talked down to, only to have the person whose job it is, because it was his job, is to create a safe space for these students, to tell you that that's not his job. Well, he clearly doesn't know what his job is. So maybe she could have kept the profanity, but at this point, we're passenger seat driving, we're backseat driving, right? We're here critiquing her anger and not understanding the context of her anger, which kind of drives me pisses me off a little bit, right? Because we're quick to dismiss the anger of women in particular. Let me just be, let's start there. We're quick to dismiss the anger of women as losing self-control, and then particularly women of color with losing self-control, and then men of color, like black people, right? Black men. The first thing people say when I raise my voice, the very first thing people say when I raise my voice is that I'm an angry black man. But they have absolutely no context for the reason for which I am angry, right? There are times where it is necessary for us to raise our voice and to be angry, but people use that as an excuse to silence our debate and to silence our dissent. Oh, you lost your cool. Oh, you don't have any self-control. Well, you don't understand the nature of the situation for which I am angry. So I don't agree with that. I do agree with one of the other things you said, Billy, and I'll get to that in a minute. But before I do that, let me get to this caller. Caller from 954. What is your name, comment, and or question?
It's Patrick from Myanmar again.
Patrick, how goes it, man? Thanks for the call. What's on your mind?
Well, I was thinking about what you said about where do we side with versus a person's right to offend and the right of the offender not to be harassed. Mm-hmm. And I think it depends on what the offense transgresses. Mm-hmm. And what I mean by that is, if I offend someone because of their religious beliefs, because I've been on universities my whole life, did my undergrad there, and I've seen situations where very conservative Christians were offended by either same-sex couples kissing, by the outfits worn by individuals too short or whatever. And that doesn't bother me because that's their choice. They chose to believe in that religion, and we're all not bound by it. So I'm not so much offended or take offense on their side, but if the offense transgresses against someone's race, their gender, or their sexual orientation, I can more understand because that's not a choice the person thing. I don't know if that makes any sense.
I hear you. I don't know that I agree with you 100%, but I do see where you're coming from. You're saying that I would say that people who believe in their religion so devoutly wouldn't say that it's a choice. But I would fix your argument up this way. If you're being offended by something that that if you're being offended by my existence, right? Like, you know, and I think actually, you know what, Patrick, I think I'm going to leave it where you had it, because I can't, you know, I feel there's something there. There's something there that I think we can go one nuance further, but it's not coming to me. So for now, I agree with you. I agree with you. And whenever it comes to me, I'll bring it up. But essentially what I hear you saying is that if someone is offended by my existence, right, I don't have a choice about my skin color, then I'm not concerned about your offense about my skin color, because, you know, there's nothing I can do about my skin color. But if you're offended by the fact that, yeah, I think I understand your nuance. Give it to me again in like 15 seconds to make sure I'm not messing you up.
Okay, no problem.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So, yeah, I wanted you to repeat it right there.
Oh, no, because I'm sorry to hear you. But basically, you know, I'm not being very articulate because I'm just thinking it's because of my head. But to me, it matters that I'm transgressing a person's personal beliefs.
Right.
I think that's something that university is there for. People come with their beliefs, what their parents told them, or beliefs on life, lifestyles, and we're there to have a discourse and to experience other students with different cultural experiences or life experiences that may contradict that. I think that's a great thing about universities.
Let's try it this way. Let's try it this way. And I want you guys in the chat room to answer this question. Should someone be free to offend me based on my religion? Is that what I'm hearing you saying?
Absolutely. Or any beliefs about anything, about, I don't know, if it's cool to smoke or not smoke or drink, whatever it may be. I think that's fair game to offend, because we're trying to get to a point where we're more enlightened. Okay. So that means that I have to push you on what you believe and you push me. But to offend someone just by their very existence, by, like you said, by their color, their sexual orientation, I think or their gender, that's different. That's where I may draw the line about your freedom to offend them.
Okay, so then I want to ask everyone in the chat room, the next part is, do you believe that we have the right to offend? Now, here's the problem. Now, this is Billy. This is where I agree with you in the chat room. I agree with you because there's really no law that can be written to police this type of thing, right? It has to be a cultural norm. It has to be something that we agree upon without the need of law to say that this is a way we're going to behave. We're not going to allow this, you know, and we're not going, but we will permit that. And we can do that by a social contract. Unfortunately, we accomplish that by public shaming right now. And I don't necessarily agree with that fully and completely, but that's really the only way that we can implement this. So my last question to the audience, everyone who's listening, do we have the right to, should we be free without any ramifications, public ramifications, to offend people based on their race, their ethnicity, their orientation, or anything else that is intrinsically like that? It is their very essence. That's the question. And I hear you saying that's where you draw the line, Patrick.
Yeah, so once again, I wouldn't pass a law for it, but just for civil, the way we conduct ourselves. Mm-hmm. Because I got to the same argument, I think, with Cam Geller had the draw the Prophet Muhammad cartoon. I know I disagree with her motivations. I do feel like that was fair game. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because
that's the first thing it reminded me of when I saw this. It reminded me of the Charlie Hebdo cartoon, and the entire conversation about should they be free to offend, and this is one of the things that we still have not answered as a broader society. Patrick, thanks so much for the call. I want to get to the TPP and get to this other call really quickly, but we haven't answered that as a society. Should we be free to offend for the sake of offense? Here's the last thing that I didn't say in the last segment, but I kind of talked about before, particularly with Bill Maher, when he was like, get over it. It's Halloween. You know, people should be free to, you know, offend you just one night of the year. Think about Charlie Hebdo. Think about Yale University example. Think about all these examples. What does it entail? It generally entails, hang on, let me give a caveat. I want to give a caveat at the beginning. I have seen examples of Black people dressing up in something that offends another race. Now, that disclaimer is out the way. For the most part, it always entails a white person dressing up either as Hitler, dressing up as a Native American, dressing up in blackface, dressing up. It always seems to involve the dominant culture dressing up to mock a subculture. And that's where you really have to look at this as a society and say, listen, do all of the minority groups have to kowtow to the juvenile expression of liberty by these people who only want to offend us? Because I think we can at least agree that this is a juvenile expression of liberty, right? If this is your protest for your freedoms, then you have a very infantile understanding of what freedom really is. All right, let's talk about the TPP. TPP, the text of the TPP was released, I believe, either Thursday night or Friday of last week. Trans-Pacific Partnership. I've got a lot of meat on these bones and not a lot of time. But whatever, I'll take as much time as it takes. And if you have questions, if you want to get more information on it, you can call in 857-600-0518. Trans-Pacific Partnership. We basically know the core of it is a treaty between nations that engage in trade across the Pacific. I believe Australia, Japan, Vietnam, different nations that that we trade with in that region. It has been fiercely opposed by Elizabeth Warren, has been fiercely opposed by Bernie Sanders, fiercely opposed by labor unions. It has been championed by President Obama and backed by the Republican Party. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. The very first reason I said something is wrong with this deal was because I saw President Obama in lockstep with the Republicans in lockstep with President Obama, and we never see it on anything else except for this neoliberal trade deal, which to me is a red flag. Now, as I unpack the deal, and then let me just go over a couple of key points and discuss them, and then I could tell you why I don't know where I am on this. And you guys don't crucify me. I don't know where I am on this, and I'll explain why in a minute. My general position is to oppose it. I have opposed it, but the more I'm reading about it, the more I'm understanding their argument for it. That's it. I'm not saying I agree with it, but I understand their argument for it, which should allow us to have a really good conversation. The number one thing that stands out to me that is problematic, that I don't think anyone can get around, is the investor state dispute settlement, the ISDS. And the goal of the ISDS is to mediate disputes between a government and foreign investors. Here's the problem with that. Right now, we have a means of resolving disputes that involves one nation bringing the complaint against another nation. This ISDS allows a private investor, an individual or a conglomerate, a company or corporation, to bring a suit against a nation because of any type of regulation, any type of laws that encumbers their investment, that inhibits their freedom and their investment. The case that they gave to justify this was in the event that a nation nationalizes all of the businesses within its borders, thereby taking and owning all of the investment that was made into that country, all the foreign direct investment, right? So Bill Gates goes to invest in Vietnam. Vietnam decides that we're going to nationalize everything. Now Bill Gates lost his entire investment. The ISDS says that Bill Gates now as an individual can go and sue that government for damages. The problem with this is that it gives so much freedom to the investor, to the capitalist, to get financial compensation for things that they disagree with, for regulations that may encumber their business efforts. This opens a really big door. And this is where I'm completely opposed to the TPP, because this opens a big door for investors to indirectly control the regulations that happen inside the borders of the United States, right? So if a company feels, and this is something you could read the article by Elizabeth Warren in the Washington Post, where she discusses where a company or an investor who is not satisfied or feels that the banking regulation in the United States is too punitive or too restrictive, then they have the right to sue America. Japan can't sue America, or they can, but Japan would not be the Japan would not be the person to sue America. As I stumble over that, the individual investor would be able to sue America and potentially get financial compensation, which would have the effect of making us less prone to regulate. This by itself. And here's the other thing. Go one step deeper. This is not a panel of independent judges who are going to be handling this arbitration. This is more than likely, according to a lot of sources that I've been reading, this is more than likely going to be corporate arbiters, basically people who are working on behalf of corporations, coming together as an arbiter in a case to decide whether or not the regulations that a nation passed burden an investor such that he deserves financial compensation. That part is extremely disturbing, and this is the part that everyone has thrown red flags over, and this is the part that Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders, a lot of key progressive voices have opposed, because it puts a nation who is passing regulations for what's in the best interest of the people generally. But the ideal regulation is to protect the people. It puts that nation at the mercy of investors who are now able to seek financial compensation because they disagree with that regulation. Of course, President Obama pushed back on that and said that Elizabeth Warren is being a little dramatic in that. Or at least he didn't say that directly, but the administration in general said that. Here's another thing that I disagree with, and you know what? And then at the end, I'll tell you why I'm having a hard time with it, because there's so much that I disagree with, but then there's something else. I disagree with the impact on public health, because it is giving an extension on patents on life-saving medications, and it's extending the practices that we use here in the United States, which was 12 years of patent protection before anyone can get it. Actually, not the patent protection, but the 12-year waiting period before competing drug manufacturers can use clinical trial data to create their own version. They're extending this to countries, let's say like Vietnam, who didn't have those types of protections. And because they didn't have those types of protections, they were able to create a generic drug faster than we would here in the United States. Now we are extending the practices of the United States to all of these third world countries or developing nations. And now they're having to abide by US policies with regard to pharmacy patents, which necessarily means that the price of drugs will go up in those nations. Now, when you're dealing with nations that are developing, you are dealing with nations that are more prone to have diseases, more prone to need these types of medications. And now we are expecting these lesser developed countries, these LCDs, to basically have to move up to the living standard of the United States with regard to pharmaceuticals, which inevitably is going to lead to people not being able to get and obtain and afford their medication for their different diseases. So that part is problematic. The ISDS is definitely problematic. Then there's a big one. Here's the one that's the biggest hypocritical thing to me. It's the labor rights. there's a lot of language in the TPP that suggests that they are going to not extend, but require other nations to allow for collective bargaining, which is good, to fight against child labor, which is good for everybody, right? With collective bargaining in nations like Vietnam, I keep going back to Vietnam, but that's the biggest example of all these things. Nations like Vietnam being able to or having to allow collective bargaining, that does bring a measure of protection here in the United States, because we would be competing on a more level playing field. Granted, the collective bargaining in Vietnam would still be at a great advantage compared to collective bargaining in the United States. This will mean that we will lose jobs overseas, right? But we're hemorrhaging jobs anyway overseas. But we are going. This TPP is suggesting that we're going underneath these nations. The idea that these nations will begin collective bargaining, they will end child labor, all these things that sound good. Here's the problem. The problem is this: that there really is no teeth to the expectation that they are going to enforce these labor laws. There's really no teeth. There's really no mechanism where, for instance, let's take the individual investor who's not satisfied with the regulation and feels that the regulation is hindering his investment, is burdening his investment. That individual investor now has the right to go and sue an entire nation over his investment. But there's no mechanism in the TPP for labor unions to do likewise, to say, here's Vietnam. They are not actually living up to their labor union promises according to the TPP. And this labor union cannot bring the same type of action against Vietnam. So it clearly, this is the perfect example, right? Put them side by side. This clearly is about liberalizing the global economy and making it easier for businesses to expand internationally, to lower tariffs in some respects, and to just make it easier for foreign direct investment to flow at the expense of labor, because labor is at the disadvantage in this equation. Labor cannot sue directly an investor. Labor cannot sue another nation directly. An investor can sue the nation directly. Who's at the advantage and who's at the disadvantage? Here's the other thing. It almost becomes a bargaining chip. It almost becomes something that an administration, let's say we got a Republican administration in, it becomes something that Republican administration can turn a blind eye to, because they don't want labor in the first place, right? They can turn a blind eye to and say, you know what, Cambodia, we'll just, forget about it. We're not really worried about that because we need you to work on this particular issue. It becomes a bargaining chip that can be passed around, which means there is no priority. Labor does not have a priority in the TPP. And because of that, it puts it at a disadvantage to capital, which is the story of American life. The story of Western civilization has been capital having the advantage over labor, and labor not being able to compete with capital, when in actuality, the system doesn't work. The system does not work without capital, and the system does not work without labor. Let's see if I have any questions on the TPP over here, and then I want to get to my last little segment. We're going to definitely go over overtime. It's a lot of rhetoric, but nothing to do with enforcement. Yeah, it's a lot of rhetoric. Thank Obamacare for that. Prices would have with or without Obamacare. Okay, I must have started the conversation in the middle. Let's read this comment from Davin. Actually, well said, Hank. What is keeping companies from abusing people when they are controlling the government? Government is supposed to represent the people and hold back businesses from abusing the people. And then he says, what is keeping the companies from abusing? That's the whole thing, Hank. And you did say it well said. If we allow, and it's essentially a done deal, what we're creating is an environment where government becomes answerable to investors through direct compensation. They can't change our laws. They can't change our regulation. But if they can get financial compensation because of our law, then that has the same effect as controlling our law. And so now the government has become the handmaiden of investors at the expense of the people. Because who's going to protect the people, as Hank said, if not the government? Don't tell me the people are going to protect themselves. When some of these corporations have a larger annual revenue than some of these nations have GDP. You can't, all these people who believe that the people by themselves can fight back and defend and protect themselves against corporations. And you say, libertarians like to say this, that all you have to do is stop buying their product. How do you stop buying their product when they're able to flood every avenue of your life with two things? One, incessant advertising. So all you're getting is their product in your face all day long. And then two, by limiting your choices where you don't have equal competition or complete competition, free competition. You have a set number of choices that corporations have decided to give you. There's an economic term for competition, that type of competition that I'm looking for, and it escapes me. But that's you can't. It takes government to fight, and let me rephrase this. It takes government to protect the people from the vices of big business. And if you can't see that big business, as well as capitalism, has inherent vices, then you're completely blind to the reality of the last 300 years of since, well, what year was 1776 was the year that Adam Smith wrote The Wealth of Nations. So since then, right, since we've been engaging in this experiment of capitalism, you have been completely blind if you cannot, at least at this point, admit that there are some inherent vices to capitalism, to business practices. What's in the best interest for businesses is not always in the best interest of the people. That doesn't make them, no one is here saying that they're evil barons, right? Some of them are. But what we're saying is that every business decision is not going to benefit the average American. And who is here to serve the average, we the people, if not the government? And the TPP puts the government at the beckoning call of corporations, of investors. Now, here's where I have problems with the TPP on the opposite side of the equation. The TPP actually represents liberal thought. In America, we mix it up. We have it backwards. In the international community, capitalism is best represented by neoliberal policies. It's actually called neoliberal capitalism. Here, domestically, we refer to the people who support capitalism unabashed. We call them conservatives. Internationally, it's totally different. Internationally, if you're a capitalist, you're known as a liberal. A part of the neoliberal paradigm is this idea that the more we become interconnected and interdependent economically, the less likely we are to have wars. That the more we grow our interdependence and the more wealth that we grow internationally, the more we have the ability to reduce poverty. Now, we have plenty of qualms with that assertion, because we see that a lot of the wealth that is being amassed today is coming at the expense of the most poor, right? It's coming by extracting wealth. But there is something to the idea of the more we are economically interdependent, the less likely we are to go to war. So I can't entirely dismiss the neoliberal idea of peace through economics. I want to give President Obama the benefit of the doubt and say that this is why he's going along with this, but I can't give him that benefit of the doubt. I would just say for me, there is always a good reason to become internet. There is always a good reason to have an open market, to have an open economy where you have an exchange, not only a business, but an exchange of ideas. We do not want an international system with closed off economies where we're not engaging in trade. One, because that would put us, the entire nation, the entire world, back in poverty. But two, it creates an isolation perspective. It creates an isolationalist position. And the more isolated we are, the more likely there is the climate of distrust. This is getting over into international relations theory, but this is essentially what neoliberals believe. Neoliberals believe that we can have peace through economic and ideological exchanges of ideas and trade. The damning part of that assertion is that we have not seen this wealth spread. We've seen it come on the back of the poorest people, not only in America, but on the back of the poorest people across the globe. I don't think that the paradigm is completely lost. I just think that the way that we carry out this paradigm is completely broken. We carry it out as a zero-sum game when it does not have to be a zero-sum game. Now, let me stop being esoteric. Here's the thing. If we would stop engaging in capitalism with the idea of extracting the last dime out of every person we possibly could, stop just long enough to realize that there are other options for how we engage in this capitalistic system, then not only could we grow, not only could the rich get richer, but we can pull more people out of poverty globally. But we can't even have that conversation. And I'm going to stop it right there. I have plenty more to give, but I'm actually working on paper about it. But we can't even have that conversation without people swearing that we're socialist, communist, Leninist, Maoist, fascist. When in reality, the solution that we're looking for is not anywhere near a command economy. It's simply about looking at this neoliberal paradigm that we're trying to spread around the globe and realizing we can do better. But they don't want to do better. They just want to continue to extract the wealth because they're comfortable with this current paradigm. And that's the problem. So where I'm stuck, and just to make it really clear, where I'm stuck in this is that it's not a completely failed paradigm. It's just that we've completely failed at trying to make it any better. And so long as we keep closing our eyes and saying this is the best that we can do, then we will always be expanding this neoliberalism across the globe, swearing that we're making the world better, but at the same time we're making people richer at the expense of the poorest among us. But people can't even take a second to look and consider something else. All right, folks, I'm just not running my mouth. That's something I'm really passionate about, but I don't want to go into too many details about it because I'm out of time and I'm already over time. I want to address something, one last thing before I go, to shift gears hard. Let me play this clip. This is, and I didn't get a chance to look up his name again, whatever. It's on my Twitter feed. I'll play the video. I want you to listen to him and then I'll go find his name so I can address him. This is regarding the Tyshawn Lee, the little boy who was assassinated in Chicago. Very tragically so. I spoke about it last week. I want you to listen to this guy.
Now to some personal thoughts. I want everyone to take a good look at this little boy. That wonderful smile. His name is Tyshawn Lee. He was 9 years old, a fourth grader in Chicago, who police say was targeted by a gang and assassinated, shot down like an animal in an alley, slaughtered. Now think about your own kids. Can you imagine this happening to your baby? Horrifying. Well, what I don't understand is, where's the outrage over this boy's death? Where are the civil rights leaders, the demonstrations, the protests? We saw riots in cities when a white police officer shot and killed Michael Brown in Ferguson, Missouri. The Justice Department stepped in, the president weighed in, and the chants erupted, Black Lives Matter. If that is true, Chicago should be ground zero right now, with people flooding the streets saying enough is enough. Does he have to be killed by a police officer for anyone to be outraged? Look at the face again. If there were ever a time to march, to demand justice, it is now, folks. It is now.
Yeah. All right. I do need a 2-hour show because I never have enough time. This guy's name is Ken Lynn, L-E-N, Lynn Cannon. And man, I just bit off something pretty big. It's going to take me a few minutes to unpack. Last week, I talked about Tyshawn Lee and my outrage about it and my disgust with anyone who's barbaric enough to actually do something like this. I don't care what color they are. I would just as soon put that person underneath the jail as if they were a police officer who did it. But Mr. Lynn Cannon is his last name. I can't remember his name, which is probably good. Lynn Cannon brings this standard argument, counter argument that always arises whenever there's an incident of black on black violence. Now, here's the difficult thing. I actually agree. My anger is, and my outrage is probably more than he could imagine. So I am outraged about Tyshawn Lee. I hope they find the people who did this and put them under the jail. I hope they find everyone. It's coming out that the father doesn't want to snitch. Put the father's ass in jail. Put everybody in jail who has anything to do with this little boy being killed. My outrage is at 10 out of 10. But what this guy is doing here on Channel 11 in Houston is he's forwarding an idea that is disingenuous because it is frivolous. What he is saying, even though it sounds good and everybody is spreading it and it's viral and everybody's saying, amen, he's telling them. Answer me this. First of all, don't answer me the question yet. Let me make something plain. There have been constant demonstrations, events, pleading with the officers, pleading with the people in power to do something. I mean, church after church, Father Flager, the National Action Network. People talk about Al Sharpton. Do you know Al Sharpton's organization is in Chicago almost every single weekend trying to do something about the black on black violence in Chicago? The Rainbow Coalition, Jesse Jackson. People talk about these guys, but they are in Chicago every single week doing something about black on black violence. The problem is the media does not cover those things because it is not sensationalized. No one really cares about the tedious work of changing a community. They only care about the glamorous outrage that shows up at a protest or at a rally or at a riot. That's all the media cares about. So this idea that nobody is saying something is disingenuous, frivolous, and there's no need for me to cuss this guy out. People have been consistently working, and the fact that you don't know about it means or simply demonstrates how out of touch you are. The fact that you are not involved. What are you doing besides giving your commentary, besides just running your mouth? What rally have you organized? Instead of waiting on Black Lives Matter to organize every single thing, where are you? Besides driving home in your luxury car, or not even driving, riding with your driver to your luxury condo, while you're criticizing the people who are actually doing something about issues that directly impact their life. And this is what kills me, is people want to dictate to the only people out there who are actively, visibly doing something. You want to tell them what they should be angry about and what they should not be angry about while you do nothing but get on TV with your lame suit, because that's not even a nice suit. You get on TV and you criticize their efforts because finally something has come across your table that you're angry about. But why weren't you angry a long time ago? Why weren't you angry when people have been killed why weren't you active? Why weren't you present Why didn't you know about all the efforts that are happening in Chicago every single week? You know why? Because it wasn't important to you until you could get on TV and make a big spill about it so that people can like and share your video. That is the extent of your activism. And so to people like you, Lynn Cannon, and all these other people who are so busy criticizing the only people out there who are doing something, is to shut the hell up. That's my advice to you, because you are not helping. You are only hurting, and you're capitalizing on this little boy's life. Are you angry about it? You should be angry about it, but you should have been angry before he got killed, and you should have been saying something before he got killed. And you better be saying something after he got killed. This is the last thing I'm going to say to you guys, YouTube. Sorry, kind of got off track there, because I absolutely hate. This is why I don't talk about black on black violence, because it is always used as a tool to silence the people who are out there working. It is always used as a tool to try to invalidate the protests that are happening. And the lapse of logic here, he wants somebody out there to protest. He wants somebody out there. Who are they going to protest? A protest by definition means that we are fighting against the system. You do not go into the streets to protest a gang. You go into the streets to protest the system that allows the gang, that permits the gang, that tolerates the gang. And so there is no march against the gang members. You can go and do a demonstration. You can go and cry. You can go and shout and say, you know, you guys to put down the guns. But you have to understand, there is a difference between violence that happens in the street and violence that is authorized by the state. And because people don't understand or don't want to understand that fundamental difference, you always get these token people who run around Johnny-come-lately, who never said anything prior, who never said anything about the killings that have been taking place all this time, who never said anything about police violence, who never said anything about the systemic oppression that led to this type of violence, the redlining, the fact that 50% of black men don't have jobs, the unemployment rate in young black men is around 51%. The fact that once they do get they can't even get an interview because their name is Ray Sean. They have an Afrocentric sounding name. We can't speak to all of the economic factors that lead to people joining gangs, that lead to the violence. We can't speak about that because all they want us to talk about is pull your pants up, stop the violence, and be more like us. Anyway. That's enough for tonight, folks. Let me read a couple comments and then I'm gonna get out of here. Actually, no, it's already late. You guys have a good one. I'm done. It's the Benjamin Dixon Show.
And until that moment comes, when we, the Americans, are able to accept the fact that on that continent we are trying to forge a new identity for which we need each other, that I am not a ward of America. I am one of the people who built the country. Until this moment.
And we are brothers. It's not a question of Jews or Christians or Muslims. We're all in the same boat.
We need each other.
Love is a condition so powerful. It may be that which holds the stars in the firmament.
Until this moment.
Love.
Until this moment.
Love.
Until this moment.
I come to you today to say that we can build a newer and better nation. I say we can do so, that we must do so, and that we will do so.
You've tuned in to The Benjamin Dixon Show. Visit us online at www.thebenjamindixonshow.com.